You're good.
Okie dokie. And thank you, Jen. Today is Thursday, February 25th, 2021. The time is 3:02 p.m. This is the Youngstown City County Safety Committee meeting, and I will be chairing this meeting today. My name is Anita Davis. I'm First Ward City Council and Committee Chairwoman. Also present today are Councilman Hughes, and at the present time, Councilwoman Turner. Also present is Chief Carl Davis, our clerks Jennifer Ossinger and Valencia Morrow, and Attorney Jeff Limbian from the Law Department. And that concludes the chairperson's roll call. We do have enough here for a quorum for the committee. And so under item number 2 is new business. And the first item is something that's Councilwoman Basha Adamczak, who's a committee member, that she submitted, and was dealing with ATVs and motorcycle enforcement. I just had a brief gist of it. I apparently, Chief, if you know anything about a complaint about the motorcycles and ATVs, do you have any information about this?
Yes.
From her?
Yes. Last spring and summer, Councilwoman Davis, we had an issue with motorcycles and ATVs riding through neighborhoods, disrupting other motorists and neighborhoods. This was something that was not unique to just Youngstown, Ohio. It was something that we found out later that was occurring all over the country. Whether these guys would go on YouTube or Facebook and, communicate and talk about, starting these type of motorcycle gangs and then go out and just be disruptive. But we put together a team of officers that were that concentrated and focused on that, and we pretty much nipped it in the bud after several arrests, confiscated a few of the ATVs and motorcycles. 35 actually would be the total of motorcycles that were confiscated. And there were several arrests that were made. Now, if this problem should occur again, I mean, I have no problem with, having officers putting this same group out and focusing on that situation again.
Okay, Samantha?
Thank you. Through the chair. Chief, did you guys focus on neighborhood or just went out after individual complaints?
Yeah, we would, because they were riding groups. I mean, I'm talking about groups of 20, 25, 30 motorcycles and ATVs. Our officers were out in various locations of the city. If they would see them, they would address them or engage them. A couple of them it was some pursuits. I think some pursuits happened out of this. And again, like I said, I know we confiscated several ATVs, motorcycles, and made several arrests. If my memory serves me correctly, I think there were a couple of guns involved. And I have Lieutenant Butler here who was working on that detail. And that's why I'm looking over and I'm asking him some of the questions because he was there, he participated in it.
Anyone else have questions for the chief? Councilman Hughes?
Yes. Carl, excuse me, Chief and Lieutenant.
Carl is fine.
Listen, we had a kick up this year. I've seen, and it's been going on pretty good. But the groups that I've been seeing, leastwise in my ward, and going back and forth, and they in that number or more that you're saying, and they all over the place when they're doing. I would kind of suggest though, because I don't want to see a whole bunch of mass pursuits or even the gunplay back and forth. But these kids they knowing each other and they are socializing with each other, and a lot of them is on the younger side. Maybe the lieutenant and whatever crew that you got together doing this can do something with videos and investigations and following up on them, and then going to their homes or whatever the case would be, and start collecting some names and get them to break up the group. That way, sort of then having to chase somebody and get involved in what they're doing, because they're all over the place on these bikes. I get that. But I don't want to see bad luck fall upon them or us, in the sense of some of these non-drivers, which a lot of them seems to be. They just get on a scooter, man, or a dirt bike or whatever it looks like they're riding, but they don't look old enough half the time to even have a license. I get that some of them are, don't get me wrong. And I think that it may be a little bit more involved, but to use the bubbles to stop them and the sirens and whatnot and get into pursuit, they're gonna run. It's almost guaranteed. They're almost doing it to run. I think if you video them, if you can get the activity and unmarked vehicles or something and video their behavior, follow them, get them at the one point or another, and start picking them off one by one in that way eventually. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't think I'm trying to tell you to ignore crimes that are committing in their presence, but these things can be disastrous if we don't really look at it. There's a lot of people involved in these things, and so not all of them is bad. I just think that we can get them, and I'm not saying don't charge anyone, but I'm just trying to be careful about the pursuits. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Chief, do you want to respond?
Yes, can I have Lieutenant Butler respond to that, please?
Sure. This is Lieutenant Brian Butler, Youngstown Police Department, Internal Affairs Division. Lieutenant Butler?
Yeah, through the chair, Councilman Hughes, everything you said is correct. They do that, in my opinion, to run. We had what started this detail last spring in the summer was they were getting so bold, these groups. They were surrounding a few officers in their marked patrol car and taunting them. So we launched this program. There were very few pursuits, believe it or not, because what we did was used unmarked vehicles and focused on a lot of the gas stations, followed their social media accounts to see, because they put everything on social media, and it really helped us. We made a lot of identifications, went to their houses. We did seize, I think it was 35 illegal ATVs. And what we found most successful was to basically jump on them at the gas stations when they stopped to get gas. That eliminated the pursuit. And we kind of just pulled them off of the bikes, wrote them their tickets. Of course, if they had guns or anything, it turned into felony charges. But most importantly, seized their bikes, their dirt bikes, their ATVs and things like that. So very challenging to think of how to do that without chasing them, but it was very surprisingly successful. And it got to the point where we got so many seized that it slowed them down, but of course it didn't eliminate them. And as the coming time gets warmer, I'm sure they've got their hands on new ones by now. And hopefully we don't have that problem again, but it is as Chief Davis mentioned, it is a national trend. Pittsburgh, Cleveland, I even spoke with those departments to see how they were combating that. One thing we did in addition was worked with Mahoney County Sheriff's Office, and their drone unit came out with us on every detail. So they would launch their drone, and the drone would pick up the groups of illegal riders. So we didn't even have to chase them, because like you said, Councilman Hughes, we don't want to get them hurt, an officer hurt, anybody hurt. So the drone was instrumental. They would lead us right to the house, and then we would go get the people. So that's just a little insight as to how that detail was ran and what was successful.
Follow up?
Go ahead, Jimmy.
That's exactly what I was trying to allude to when you should have led off with that.
Okay. Chief, I do have two questions for you, Chief. Number one, do you still have the ATVs?
Do we still have the ATVs or were they?
Most
Through
of
the
them?
chair, Lieutenant Ross was working with the prosecutor's office to try to seize them through the courts. There were, I want to say, a handful given back, but most of them were either seized as a part of the plea bargain or plea deal over in the court, or not. A lot were stolen, quite frankly, with serial numbers scratched off. So I would say a very small percentage were given back.
Okay. Second question, the department doesn't have its own drone? And are you interested in obtaining a drone?
Through the chair, that is in the works through the services division. There's a lot to it than just buying a drone. You have to be I think it's FAA certified and things of that nature.
FAA, I'm certified, yeah.
Yeah, but yes, we are, there's a grant, I believe, that we're looking at to secure one, correct? Two of them.
Lieutenant Butler, be sure to call me tomorrow.
Yes, ma'am.
When you have a Santa Claus, make sure you call. Okay. Samantha, Councilwoman Turner, I see your hand up.
Yes, through the chair, just one. There's a small human, I'm sorry. So I have a question. If you are working with other city departments, one of the biggest issues that I have in my ward right now and all summer is that there's a few people who repair these. So they're revving them up, and I've even sent like videos to code enforcement about it. So are you working with code enforcement when those type of issues come up to be kind of directed to where people may congregate to repair them, not so much driving them around?
Through the chair, I have not yet worked with code enforcement, but I have no problem with working with them.
Okay. And for the record, Councilman Julius Oliver is also present today. Okay. Are there any other questions for the chief on this item? Nope. Okay. This item number 2 on the new business is the creation of an external police review board. Chief, I'd like to get your thoughts on this.
Okay. Now, and I've spoke to you, Councilwoman, about this. I'm receptive to the idea of a police review board. I don't know enough. I don't have enough information about them, but I'm very receptive to the idea. I can recall, if you don't mind, years ago, probably the late 80s, when we were close to establishing one here in the city of Youngstown. There was an incident, a racial incident, a very ugly incident. They probably don't, no one wants to talk about it, but I think sometimes it's necessary to, talk about it. But there was an incident where officers were driving in the YMHA Westlake Project area and got on their bullhorns and just started a stream of profanities and racial slurs towards the residents. Directed a stream of profanities and racial slurs. Probably one of the ugliest incidents I've witnessed in my 35 years in the police department. I can recall, matter of fact, you and Chief Hughes were here at the time. Reverend Fisher and some of the other pastors were very adamant about getting a review board started here in the city of Youngstown, and somehow it fell apart and never did materialize. But I'm very open and receptive to the idea and have no problems with revisiting that. Okay.
Chief, just to let you know, I'm not dragging my feet on this, and it's not going to go away. You and I we've talked about this. I mean, that's common knowledge that you and I talk frequently, and even when we were working together, we talked about this topic, and it's not something that I want to see happening next year or 2 years down the road. I see this thing coming into creation in a matter of a couple of months. There's no reason to delay it. This is something that's been way overdue, and police departments around the country have been able to hold it off, and frankly, not to the benefit of the community. Um, and so what I'm going to be asking of both you and Lieutenant Butler probably is we'll have a phone call, and I can run some ideas past you. And I've suggested a couple of police departments that you could look at, and I've studied them closely. When I was under then Chief Hughes, he and I would go back and forth about this here, and so I've had a plan for a civilian review board since he was the chief. So if you guys are amenable to it, I'd like to do a Zoom phone call and give you some of my ideas, and we get this thing going. A civilian review board would need the support of city council and the input of city council as well.
Through the chair.
Councilman Oliver.
Thank you, through the chair. I just wanted to say that I agree with you, and it's not just a city council thing, but I think residents all across the city are calling for this right now, especially given the current climate of the country. So I'm just saying I wholeheartedly support, and I know that our residents, our citizens support it as well. Thank you for the time.
Thank you. When I talked about city council, what I mean is like city council having the ordinance created. That's something that we would do to create the Citizens Review Board. I would expect if we go forward with this, and that the city council, each member of city council, as well as the mayor and the president of council, would be reaching out and asking for community input for this. But the individuals who's responsible for this creation would have to be the council, would have to be city council. Citizens are not the ones on the line for it. It's council's responsibility to give it the teeth to make a citizens review board something that's more than just, again, on paper. That's all I meant by that.
To the chair.
Yes, Chief.
Which departments or which cities did you look at?
I looked at first off, Las Vegas Police Department, Columbus Police Department, Atlanta Police Department, and you're gonna laugh.
No.
I don't know if I said it, Cleveland. Okay. Cleveland's been a dragger. I didn't mean to say that, yeah. But look at those, particularly look at Las Vegas, Atlanta, and Pittsburgh had one as well. But my understanding, and it's it's from my research from years ago, a couple of years ago, theirs did not have the teeth. It didn't have the weight behind it to make it viable. Not that a civilian review board does not take the place of internal affairs. It only reviews complaints about police officers while they are on duty or acting in the police capacity, like on a secondary job or something like that, where we'd be liable. It's not internal affairs, and a civilian review board would only be making recommendations. It still lies with the chief of police and the mayor. So Samantha or Councilman Turner or Councilman Hughes, Councilman Hughes? Wait a minute. Whose hand was up first? Whose hand was up first? Okay. Councilman Turner.
I am willing to support the effort for a civilian review board and do my work that needs to be done from my council seat to get this moving forward. I agree with Councilman Davis that this is something that we need to move forward within the next couple months. Like, we really should be making some heavy strides on this. As she said, this has been a part of the conversation, and we're close to a year out of the heavy unrest. So it's time for us to really make these changes, and this helps put behind, helps the citizens know that we are listening and we understand, and it's time for us to get it done. So if you are feeling that this is something that we can do, and there have been instances in the Youngstown Police Department that could have used a civilian review board, then let's everybody do the work, and let's see this out before this summer, if possible.
I agree with you. Councilman Hughes.
I was trying to get this mute and unmute thing down, and I haven't got it down to a
Not a
science.
problem.
Here's the thing, is what I would say, in however direction the administration wants to go forth with it, it's probably be up with them. But at the time that we was looking at, and my research on police review boards, it's across the board into what they do and don't do. You know, almost all of them are different in power, structure. I think it was Cleveland at one point, or Toledo, at one point they had a review board, and it was even embraced by the unions, in the sense of they had an option of selecting going to a review board or going to whatever step that discipline would come up before it, just to adjudicate them or not, you know, as to what was going on. So to me, you know, it's going to be difficult to just say citizens review board unless we're really looking into being specific as to what they will do, won't do, or the variables put together. It would be a lot of work too, but I think that steps to get started would be that we want it. I get that. I'm not trying to take away from it. But if you really start looking into the various boards, you see that the power structure of the board, they're different. You know, some the officers even have a choice to go to. Some they do not. Some is automatic. You know, some is in companion with, you know, internal affairs or back or not. Civil service, you know, in the same way. You know, these are all going into things. You know, especially when you're talking about criminal and non-criminal matters, as to the review boards. You know, sometimes they have power to do this and sometimes they do not, because of the judicial system. You know, they are not police officers, they're not prosecutors, and they're not this and that, you know. So, and what evidence is open up to them. There's a lot of restrictions that come on the board, but in general, police conduct, you know, at one point is open for them, just like internal affairs. So I think that, you know, probably.
What do you mean by that?
Well, when the conduct of a police officer first happened, police is engaged in conduct. It's not necessary, no one is saying misconduct or not, it's just conduct of the police department, you know, a police officer. So now it may look bad in the press, it may do something. So now, when do the review board kick in? You know, and how often do the review board kick in? You know, it seems like we're saying that there's an obvious problem, let the review board. But internal affairs will start doing some investigation. And now we're saying, is that when we bring in a review board or not? If the city don't have something to review, in a sense. There's a lot of conduct by police officers or every day. Almost everything they do is conduct. So what I'm saying is that if the city chooses not to investigate, there's nothing to review. But if you're talking about reviewing every conduct of a police and let the review board, you know, settle that or whatever the case would be. So I'm just saying it can be complex, you know,
Well,
and not all of them is the same. That's all I'm saying.
Right. I agree with you, but that's why we're talking about creating one. It's not even in place yet, but it's the fact that we are saying we are going to create it. And and all that you're talking about is in the creation process.
I would agree, and I'm not trying to, let me just say this and I'll back out. I'm not trying to be argumentative. I'm not disagreeing with the creation of of Police Review Board. What I am saying is that be aware of what's all involved. That's all I'm saying. So that when we go forth with creating with the system council, we know of that. I get that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And thank you, Councilman Hughes. And I was just trying to make sure I stayed on point to put on the record that Mayor Brown is present and Council President Demaine Kitchen is present. And I think that's the newest additions, I think. Okay, so so Chief, I'm sure all members of City Council will be probably in contact with you to try to get input and everything else. And for you to do, and like I said, I'm sure you and your internal affairs commander can do the research of other police departments to see how they do it. And I know what Chief Davis. It's a hard name for me.
I know.
to remember.
How do you forget?
I want to thank you for being receptive to these ideas and not closing the door to them. And I'm going to probably be saying this for a while. It's refreshing. I know everything's not going to come to fruition. We know that. The way that we want it. No one's going to be 100% satisfied, but I'm appreciative of your openness. And I am going to mention one more thing, and that every civilian review board that I looked at, only residents of the municipality could be on that review board. Thank you. And if there are no other questions from anyone, Attorney Limbian?
Yes, through the chair. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, sir. Do you have any thoughts of when we could, or have you done any research so far as to on this topic?
I haven't done any research of late. I know it came up a while ago, and then it seemed as though it had been kind of tabled. But I think it's a great idea. And if you tell me that Cincinnati and Cleveland have legislation that we could maybe not reinvent the wheel, I'll be happy to draw on that and prepare a draft for you within a week.
Oh, that'd be great to at least have at least a frame to know some
Sure.
of the topics that they already have.
Absolutely.
But no one's expecting. I'm totally with Councilman Oliver that we have to get residents input. And we need input from the residents of Youngstown, Ohio, on this topic. You know what they're looking at, and giving them a realistic, being real with the public, with our residents as to what the review board is. You know, some people, and that's all I want to say on that.
Sure.
Because we're on a timetable. Because Councilman Hughes has put me on a timetable.
I sensed the urgency
timeframe.
from Councilman Hughes, and I think we better be moving.
We're going to move on.
Yes.
So.
Really, Jeff? Really?
Okay. So that's my fault. So moving on to item number 3 under new business. It is the topic of the proposed bias-free policing policy. Chief, give us an update if you would. Is it ready?
Well, we have 2 more steps to before we're in full compliance with the Ohio Collaborative. I can tell you where we're at right now. The use of force policy is complete. That's step 1. The recruitment and hiring policies is complete. We're presently exempt from the body-worn camera policies because we're still working on that right now. We've been meeting with several vendors. Actually, we met with one today I had to attend a funeral and I was not able to attend, but we met with a couple of vendors this week. So that's still in the process. And the bias-free policing policy is incomplete at this time. We're still working on it.
What's,
Yeah, go ahead.
what is the holdup on that last item? I mean, getting that policy in place.
Through the chair. I have our administrative captain here, Captain Simon, and also Lieutenant Butler, who could speak to that. If
Through the chair,
Yes, who's speaking?
Brian Butler.
Lieutenant Butler, go ahead.
I wouldn't classify that as a holdup, Councilwoman. It is tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Captain Simon and I have an appointment with the YPA union and the YPRO union. Pursuant to their collective bargaining agreements, we are to meet with them and discuss any new policies prior to their implementation. So the policy has been drafted, as you know, and the last step will be tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. to fulfill that agreement, the collective bargaining agreement, to comply with that, to meet with both unions and discuss that policy. So it's right there. That's the last checkbox, so to speak.
Great. Thank you, Lieutenant. Councilwoman Turner.
Thank you. Chief or Mr. Butler, can you give me just a brief overview of the bias-free police policy for any new person listening?
Yeah. Through the chair.
Lieutenant Butler, the brief outline.
Yes, Councilwoman. The bias-free policing policy is pursuant to the Ohio Collaborative that Chief Davis just mentioned. As you all may already be aware, there were already many of our rules and regulations that prohibited such conduct. This, however, specifically defines bias-free policing and delineates what it is, what to do if you witness it, and prohibit such activity. It is narrow and specific, I should say, to bias-free policing, as where there were many rules that prohibited that. Even our oath of office prohibits such activity.
Thank you. And thank you, Lieutenant Butler, because I was going to ask that question, which is, how does it really differ from the oath of office that the officers take to do their jobs fairly and impartially? And I appreciate you letting people know that it's just it is indeed a reminder to all of us, everyone. Chief, I do have a question. It's about the annual audit that would take place to see if there's any sort of racial profiling. You have new software in place that's supposed to assist you in being able to do that audit. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
And I have, and through the chair,
yes,
Captain Simon, our administrative captain, has been working on that, and he can speak directly to that, if you don't mind.
Okay. This would be Captain Jason Simon, Youngstown Police Department. You're the commander of the Services Division, Jason?
That's correct.
Of the Services Division. If you go ahead.
Yeah, through the chair, the software that we have in place for our computer-aided dispatch system, this new system, which has just come in place since October, of course, still working out the bugs, but it allows us to enter the race and gender, the perceived race and gender, of course, of the driver of the vehicle. That brings us into compliance with the Ohio Collaborative. So an order was issued by Chief Davis this past week, which now mandates that all officers, when making self-initiated traffic stops, have to give the perceived race and gender of the driver. And in fact, the CAD call, the call for service, cannot be closed out until such information is given. And
And,
we can of course audit that in any number of ways that we can pull the metrics from the CAD system.
okay, and what's the name of the software?
Well, it's our Spillman CAD. Spillman and Motorola are analogous companies, and it's their CAD program. So Spillman CAD, it's the one that is purchased by the Mahoning County for all the PSAPs within the county, and we're simply one of them.
Okay. Do I see Councilwoman Turner's hand up?
Yes.
Councilwoman?
Thank you. Through the chair, I just have a quick question here. Previously, I heard this is now going to be an automated process, as before it was a paper process, or are we still using the tickets and the explanation that was last given? 1 second. The explanation that was last given is we hadn't been taking that piece of information, but it also was the procedure in which we would get our tickets and had them, and then someone else would have to enter them, and it was a lot, which is why we couldn't do it. Is this completely automating the process as well, or is that something else that would need to be done?
I'm not sure what you're referring to.
Captain Simon?
Process. We never had a process in place before this. This is automated. Again, it's in our CAD system, so it's a computer program. So as the officers, they make the traffic stop, right? They're done with the traffic stop. Before the dispatcher can even remove that call, it's going to sit there for eternity until they're given the race and gender of the driver of the motor vehicle. And then, of course, because it's a computer program, there's any number of metrics we can run off of it to look at that data.
Councilwoman, you had a follow-up?
Yes. So all of this is entered in real time into a system. So in each morning, you can check how the night went the night before, Chief Davis.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else? Jimmy, is that you? I see your,
No, I'm just going on mute because you dropped my name, but no, it was not.
okay. I saw your lips moving. We didn't hear anything, so I thought.
I'm backdooring you on the phone with somebody else.
Oh, okay. That's okay. So, so we can, and you couldn't, to Chief Davis, so in effect, if we want to get a monthly breakdown of your traffic stops and things, we can get that.
You can get that now, from what I understand.
That's because it's a matter of a couple of strokes. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Because I know the collaborative, the bias thing was talking about an annual, but I don't, frankly, why would you wait a year to see if there's a problem when you can, with a bunch of algorithms, you can do it on a monthly basis, if not more frequently, if you need be. Annually that's waiting way too long to find out if you got a problem there. So I'm glad you're utilizing that system that came online in October. Thank you. Anyone else have questions for the chief? Chief, while we're on the topic of this bias-free and everything else, during one of our conversations, we had talked about the bike patrol and everything else. So, because we had talked about that again, many moons ago and everything else. So after bike patrol is brought back, and I'm hoping that we will see it, my conversation with Mayor Brown is that we're going to be seeing that shortly. But would they, if they initiate any sort of stops, would they be required to call in as well?
Absolutely. They would still be performing police duties and functions. They would be functioning as a police officer. Yeah, they will be required to do the same thing as an officer in a patrol car.
I want you to know I'm happy about the bike patrol coming back too. I know that's bringing the citizens interaction just right close to home. Those bikes have been there And they're just being, it's a waste if they don't get back on patrol. And it allows for probably a more friendlier, interaction with the community.
And
I
that's what we're,
commend both.
yeah.
I
Through
commend
the
both
chair,
of you guys.
yeah, yeah, that's what we're striving for here.
Okay. Does anyone else have any questions before we go to unfinished business? Because we're about to be gone, and the time is 3:42. Okay. On under unfinished business, dealing with the police staffing levels. Chief, if you, I know I believe the department is given a test, an entrance exam. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Has that been given already?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And what is the current staffing level?
144 patrol off, 144 sworn personnel.
And what is your expected?
Okay.
Yeah. Pardon me.
So this exam, it's going to be to keep it at 144?
No, we're actually, we've had several officers retire, and those positions have not been filled.
Okay, and?
So, yeah. So yes, they would, actually that would probably, that would boost the staff levels if we would hire.
Well, you tell me, what would the citizens of Youngstown get if you got more people? How does it benefit the citizens of Youngstown, to have 5 more people, 10 more people? What would you do with those extra people?
Well, we would use them in especially areas where we're having problems, increase police presence there. We've been talking about community policing. We definitely would like to maybe increase staffing levels in our community police department, because that's, like I said, that's what we're striving for, to engage the community and rebuild trust in the community. And I think with more personnel out there, we'll be able to accomplish that.
Okay.
Through the chair.
Councilman Oliver. I'm
Thank
sorry,
you.
Councilman Oliver.
Thank you. Through the chair. Chief Davis, or Anita or Jimmy, whoever can answer the question. Just out of curiosity, the 90s were the worst crime years that I can remember growing up in Youngstown. What were the staffing levels of the police department in the 90s compared to now?
I don't have that number in front of me, Councilman Oliver, but I could check, I can research and get that for you. Unless Anita or Councilman Davis or Councilman Hughes recall. I don't recall what the numbers were at that time.
I'm just, were they comparable, or were they higher then? Are they higher now?
I think they were higher. I think they were higher, more officers. Yeah.
Through the chair, if I may, Councilman Oliver, when I was hired in the year 2000, which is certainly, about 5 years after the height of that crime problem.
This would be Captain Simon speaking. Go ahead, Jason.
Oh, I'm sorry. Councilman Oliver, when I was hired about 20 years ago, in 2000, I was number 225 to be hired. And there was an increase. So I want to say, and I'm guessing, but educatedly guessing, that it was around that level in the mid 90s. It certainly was not as low as we are now.
Yeah, so I guess my question would be, there were more bodies at that time, but crime was a lot higher at that time as well. So it's kind of like what Anita was saying, what would be the benefit of having more officers now? Because it doesn't seem to me, not being a police officer, but just, from the outside looking in, it doesn't seem to me that more officers equate to less crime. So if somebody can help me understand that, is my thinking wrong, or?
I don't think there's a guarantee. I don't think there's a guarantee, but I think and this is just my experience, that I think the community would feel more comfortable seeing more police officers in their neighborhoods.
Councilman Hughes, any comments?
You'll get me either way, don't you, Nick? You know? The thing with manpower within the police department today, as it was back then, we always chase calls for service. The previous police chief administration, along with Captain Simon, they argued YSU dictated that through the money, the $150,000 we gave YSU to come up with the CAD system of placement of beats. And all of our calls for service, the number of calls for service is how we was chasing our manpower, if we're using that term to describe the total authorization for the police department. So that's always been the case. Now, how effective is that when we have at times, 10, 15, 20 minutes, response times? It shows that we need more. And that's what we always was driven on. I don't agree with it. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that. But that was the basic formula for how many officers you need. We had no such formula for supervisors, but we were just talking about the rank and file, the patrol officers. But, as you look at the supervisors, we perceive that we need more of those investigators because of the crime. That's all the stuff that's added up in there. But I argued that, the placement of personnel, especially when you're using the community police approach, it's not driven by calls for service. The numbers that you use, it's not. It shouldn't be. Those are different types of level of police. Those are different type of service being given, and it's good. Don't get me wrong. If we're not arguing outside of calls for service, which I think is what we're saying when we talk about how many crimes and what kind of crimes we had, we're back to scheduling how many police officers we need, but how many calls for service that we generate. And we always played with those calls for service numbers because we include almost anything that comes up. Every time the police is dispatched or whatever that is. So, sometimes if you're going to do calls for service, you actually should identify what the calls are for and prioritize them that way, and then do your numbers for calls for service. I believe that's what the industry would say. But even that's not going to address your crime problem. It's not going to do this because call for service is oftentimes after the crime. Calls for service is all informational. Calls for service could be a whole lot of different things, but it takes a lot. But I'm a community police thing. I think that we look for ways to be less big stick and less battering rams and whatnot there, and put the police out there to be our friend. And don't get me wrong, we need the police. We need the police. We need them to come with their guns loaded. No, I'm not trying to say not, and that's what the citizens want. But it's a mixture of the two.
Mm-hmm.
We are at a stage in evolution, if nothing else, that we should not look for calls for service. We should just look at it from what we can develop that will satisfy what we want to do, and how we want the police to behave. That's what we should be doing here. We've never able to say that calls for service, manning the police officer, more and more police officers is going to reduce crime. I don't think that's what Carl was trying to say. This chief was trying to say, but it's a warning. I would say if you do that, you're just shooting yourself in the foot. I shouldn't say that, but you're kind of like shooting yourself in the foot because you cannot control those type of calls. You cannot control how many times, and if that was the case, you get a community around us that has almost outside of domestic, no calls for service, you know, or something, or very little calls for service, and they should say they don't need the police at all, you know? But they do have them. So I'm just
So
saying.
follow up,
Councilman
Anita.
Oliver, follow up,
Thank-
and then Councilman Turner.
Thank you, Council. Hughes, appreciate that. So I guess with that being said, the question for me would be, you know, we had more jobs in the 90s than we do now. Poverty was lower in Youngstown than it is now. And we know that poverty is a major driver of crime. So I guess I'm asking, do we need more police officers, or do we need more programs to address poverty, or do we need to do research to come up with why certain crimes are being committed as opposed to hiring more officers? I'm just, you know, trying to figure out what's best for our citizens and what's best for the city. If anybody can answer that, or is that's something we can ponder?
Well, my idea, answering your question, I think with proper scheduling and how you assign your officers are a lot. Right now, I'm in agreement with Councilman Hughes, which is everything, you know, Youngstown PD has been operated with the same old model. Okay. And which is, because you asked the question, well, you know, based upon the 1990s, well, 1990s, we also had a whole lot more people, a whole lot more people. And you can't just go by just that ratio alone. And again, as Councilman Hughes was saying, when you look at the calls for service, a call for service is literally a call for service. That is not a call about a crime in progress necessarily. It's a call for service. If I call the police department because, and you know, my dog is stuck up on the roof, and we've had that at the Youngstown Police Department. They obtain all kinds of calls. That's a call for service. That's not a crime thing. Okay, so you have to differentiate that. And I asked the previous police chief, and I can ask every police chief probably in the country, if I give you more police officers, do you guarantee me that crime will go down because I've given you more? And not one will say yes, because they know that's a damn doggone lie.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, it would be a bald-faced lie if they said that's a guarantee, because it's not. Because unfortunately, we know that if someone is really adamant about doing a crime, they're going to do it whether they're standing there or not in the uniform. Unfortunately, we've had examples of that. But no, I could see how, I want to see our community police officers, that number increased. You know, we had one per ward. I really like that, and I would like to see that. But I'd also, and I'm not going to ask you to give out that information here, but I do believe, Chief, that you need to send to council the breakdown of where your personnel are assigned right now. You know, if you still have, you know, officers assigned to Violent Crimes Task Force, the marshals, you know, wherever they may be floating around, you know, do we have to put them there full time? You know, and are we getting the benefits full time? So if you could email us so the council can take a look, because, you know, I have been a proponent of reducing the numbers of the Youngstown Police Department, particularly at the top level. At one time we used to have 4 sergeants per shift. I think it might be reduced now. But the reason why you have 4 sergeants per shift is because, you know, literally the sergeants made regular contact with the patrol officers. They met with them on the beat. And that they were required to, because they had to meet with them in order to pull the reports.
Yeah.
Well, they don't do that anymore. And not only that, but we have the technology there that if you want to find out where your officer is at, all you do is click the switch on the mapping thing, and you know where they're parked at and how long they've been sitting there, or if they're driving around. there's other technologies that you can utilize, and if we implement with the cameras, when we implement the cameras, okay, that's another piece of technology. So would that many supervisors be required? And Councilman Hughes, I'm gonna shut up because I see your hand up, I believe. Councilwoman Turner. Councilwoman Turner. Councilwoman Turner.
Yes.
Then Councilman Hughes.
No, my hand is not up.
Okay, I'm sorry. Samantha.
Yeah.
Samantha.
Thank you. So what I hear everyone saying, Chief, is we all realize that we can't police our way out of this, and we want to see more proactive ways about doing this. And I agree with Councilwoman Davis about how is our scheduling, how is it deferred from last chief to now, and how can we perfect that and make it more efficient for the community. But what I also would be interested in seeing, if you could do some research on benchmark cities where our populations line up, not geographically, because we do have a large footprint and it's a lot of people spread across. So if we could get what policing looks like in those numbers, is adding police officers and not having the real results is something that worries all of us. And knowing the policing models are changing, I would like to see us be as efficient as we possibly can be. And I think we all know that it has not been as efficient as it could be in the past. So I would be interested in seeing that for our next meeting, that research done, and seeing what we can do without throwing more officers at it, because again, we're not going to police our way out of this crime. This is a community effort.
Chief Davis.
Yeah.
I see your hand up.
Yeah, through the chair. Yeah, I'm just responding to Councilwoman Turner. I can look at maybe Canton Police, for example. I think their city probably is close in size to ours, and the police department. That would probably be a good starting point. Maybe an area like Canton, Ohio, see what they're doing and what their staffing is.
Chief Davis, there's Canton and there's Lorraine as well, but
yeah,
I would like to say this because I don't have I'm no longer working at the police department, so I don't have a bone on wanting more officers. But just because the city's the same size of Youngstown, it doesn't make it Youngstown.
Right.
Okay. Youngstown, unfortunately, as Councilman Oliver mentioned, that even way back when we had more money and everything else, we had more crime. For whatever reason, Youngstown has had more crime, and that's why it has always maintained a higher number of police officers than cities absolutely like comparable in size, because it was always a little bit higher, but not double. Okay, not double in size. And when we look at, if you look at Lorraine or Canton, and you'll see that I can tell you right now, it's close to the size of it's smaller than Youngstown. No, one is a little bit smaller, one's a little bit bigger. Okay, but you also have to look at their crime rate and how it has been historically. And again, I would never knock the Youngstown Police Department because that's being the sole reasoning for our crime. Crime is on us, the citizens of Youngstown. Our officers shouldn't be, they want to do crime prevention. They can to a point, but we also have to police ourselves. And Councilwoman Turner, you are so right. We can't police ourselves out of this. We haven't in all those years, because when Councilman Hughes came on the job, we were a police department. We were a city of 150,000 or so, 160,000. When I got on the job, my badge was my badge number as a patrol officer was 214, and I wasn't the last one hired. Okay.
Mine was 219.
Okay. So we've had huge police departments. Okay. And with all that was thrown at it, it still didn't, it didn't clean it, it didn't resolve the situation. But Chief, if you can get the information that Councilwoman Turner has asked,
Yes.
and get it to us beforehand. If you would email how the officers are deployed. I don't want to have that information broadcast here, but I think it'd be wise, I would ask that you email it to members of council so that we can take a look at it. We don't run the Youngstown Police Department. You do. And your boss is the mayor of the city of Youngstown. But we do pass the legislation to finance your department. And we only want to make sure that we're getting the most for our bucks.
Understood.
Okay. Does anyone else have, and I do appreciate you getting that, the roster to me.
Yep.
You know, I have tried for a while to get that and to get exact numbers. It is ludicrous. It is ludicrous. No, a police chief who comes here and says, and I say, how many do you have? And you can't tell me how many officers that you have, then you don't need to be in that job. If you can't turn your back and look at the wall and tell me how many that you have, you know, and you know, waited years. I mean, I knew, but I just wanted to make sure I got it from the source. So I appreciate that as well. I appreciate your transparency. I know, and I hope we can keep that open.
We can.
We are here to support you because we're all working for the same thing.
Yep.
Make Youngstown a better place.
Yep.
So does anyone have anything else to say? Attorney Limian or Mayor Brown, anything before we break? Okay,
I'm good. Thank you. Great meeting.
thank you.
Likewise, thank you.
Okay. Number 4 is on the agenda is to schedule the next meeting. The next meeting is scheduled for Thursday, March 25th, 2021 at 3 p.m. And from Councilman Hughes, I'll take the time is 4:04 p.m. and I will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. Thank you, everybody. Have a good weekend.